This is the Sunday, July 19th, 2020 edition of the Dark Illumination Report Podcast Extra. And today we're going to be talking about doing things on Satan's timeline, not yours.
This is a Dark Illumination Report Extra with RJ Womack.
Hey everybody, glad you're here. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks for joining me again. This is RJ Womack, aka Brother Nero. This is the Dark Illumination Report Podcast, the podcast where we promote the religious worship of Satan and demons as a serious faith and way of life, and we try to promote that faith to future generations of young diabolists. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking specifically about trying to be patient and learning patience and trying not to force things because we want them to happen when we want them to happen. To always remember that Satan is an eternal being, the demons are eternal beings, and their idea of time is not the same as ours. Their concept of time is way, way different than ours. When you're an eternal being, what seems like a long time to a human being is not long to you at all. And that's something that we need to be aware of when we deal with demonic spirits, is that they don't work on our timeline, they work on theirs. And there have been times where I've had dreams and visions of things, and they haven't taken place for 3, 4, 5 years, and I start to wonder whether my dream was prophetic or not. And then about 5 years later, the exact thing that I dreamt about happens. And it's because, as I said, Satan doesn't work on our timeline. He works on his, and his timeline is not always going to be the timeline that we hope for, the timeline that we want. So it's very important to, when you pray for something, to keep that in mind and not always try to force things. That's one of the reasons why I took a step back with this ministry, as I said in the previous episode, because if you try to rush things and you try to put people in places where they don't belong, it's kind of like trying to force a round peg into a square hole. That's the example that I always use. I'm the type of person that not only do I want to put a round peg into a square hole, but I want to take the hammer and beat the shit out of it till it fits. And that's particularly the type of person that I am when it comes to trying to run an organization. I will know instinctively that a person does not fit in the organization or fit into what I'm trying to do, and I will try to force them into that position because I want to get started with the work that I think Satan wants me to do instead of listening to my intuition. And that's always blown up in my face in the past, and I try not to do that anymore, or at least try to limit my willingness to do that. It doesn't always work because I tend to do it anyway. I'm a very impatient person, and I tend to try to force the issue, and I tend to force things to happen when I think they should happen, and I don't tend to wait for Satan to reveal to me his plan. And Satan has taught me some valuable lessons the hard way because of that. And so one of the things that I try to do now is I try to wait and see who naturally fits into the plan and wait for the plan to come together. And even though I've spoken to a lot of you online and on Skype to talk about the ministry, I'm kind of sitting back and being casual because I feel like eventually Satan will reveal who's meant to be here and who's not. And I'm trying not to assume anything about anyone, and I'm trying not to assume that anyone in particular is going to be here or is not going to be here. I'm trying to just let it play out the way it's going to play out. And I would recommend that you do the same, because if you try to force things before it's time, as I said, they always turn out badly, and you end up getting into more drama than you ever wanted to get involved with. And it just causes problems, and it slows down Satan's work. That's the biggest thing. If you can avoid drama in your life, and you can avoid drama in your Satanism, and you can be patient and avoid problems, then that's always better, because it works better for Satan's plan. And I'll give you an example of not only what happens when you try to force something, but also what happens when you listen to others, kind of bringing both the podcast from yesterday and this podcast together to close it out. And that is, when I was married to my ex-wife, there was a particular guy that was around that I was working with. This was when I was much younger. And I ended up working with him not because I felt good about it. In fact, I felt really bad about it. I felt like he was bad news. And my wife insisted, you need to give him a chance. You can't always assume that people are bad news just based on a gut feeling. And of course, I came to find out later that my ex-wife wasn't really that serious about Satanism, and I should have never listened to her in the first place. But that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so I listened to my wife, being newly married and being new in the relationship, and I gave the guy a chance. That was the worst decision I ever made, and I should have never listened to her, and it caused me years and years of drama, and there's still bad blood between me and this guy even to this day. And that's just the way it is. Because I didn't follow my intuition, I tried to force the round peg into the square hole and tried to start an organization before it was time, tried to gather people before it was time, and I paid the price for that. And it's happened many times throughout my life. So this time I'm taking it very slow and just kind of letting things play out and seeing where things go. I'm not assuming anything about anyone. I'm not assuming that anyone's going to be here, as I said. And in fact, I don't know who's going to be here in the end with the ministry. I don't know who's going to help start this group. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't even know if Satan's for sure going to let it go forward the way I have it planned. I don't know. It's up to him. He's the God. I'm not. So anyway, but the other thing I know just from past history and from past experiences with most diabolists, most Satanists, is that you'll have 5 or 6 people say they want to help you with the ministry, but in the end, you'll be lucky if you have one of them actually follow through and do it. Because most people will volunteer for things, but they won't actually follow through. So I'll be lucky if 1 out of the 6 people that have volunteered actually does help me with the ministry. And I know that already from being involved in Satanism for years. And you should have the same attitude yourself. No matter how many people you meet that say they're dedicated to Satan, no matter how many people you meet that say they want to help you and they think what you're trying to do is great, you should always assume that it's very few people that are going to follow through on their commitments, because that's one of the things that, as I've mentioned over and over again on this podcast, that diabolist people involved in left-hand path, Satanism, occultism, whatever, have a problem with, and that's keeping their word and being people of honor. And you should just assume that if somebody's mouth is moving, they're probably not telling you the truth, or at least they're not being dishonest, but they're just not going to be that reliable. That's just the way it is. And if you get more than 1 or 2 people to help you that have committed to help you with any project, you should consider yourself lucky. That's just human nature, really, I guess. It's not just Satanists, but I seem to think that it tends to be more of a tendency that Satanists have than any other religion anyway. That's my opinion. So anyway, that's it for today. Take care, guys. As always, may Satan be with you, and remember to promote this podcast if you find somebody who you think could benefit from it. And any help you can give us in promoting the podcast, promoting this message, promoting the future ministry, promoting the ideas is greatly appreciated, and I never take it for granted. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for taking the time to listen to me. Have a good one, everybody. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Dark Illumination Report podcast. For the latest news headlines, show information, and more, go to rjwomack.com. That's rjwomack.com.